The night was cold, the streets were quiet, and the lamps on the corner buzzed weakly. Inside his small house, Daniel sat by the window, looking outside. He had worked a long day. His hands were rough from carrying heavy boxes, and his back ached. Life was simple but lonely for him. No family, no close friends, only his house and his work. As he looked out, he noticed something strange. By the old fence near his gate, a shadow moved, small and trembling. Daniel stood up, narrowed his eyes, and pressed his hand against the cold glass. There, under the pale streetlight, was a figure, thin, shivering, and clearly not human. Her skin glowed faintly, like silver light trapped under her flesh. Her hair fell across her face in messy strands, and her clothes were torn. She hugged herself tightly, her body shaking in the freezing air. Daniel's first thought was, a homeless alien. They sometimes appeared in the city, hiding from the patrols, unwanted by both humans and their own kind. Daniel opened the door slowly, the cold wind rushing inside. "Hey," he called softly. "What are you doing there?" The girl flinched, her large eyes snapping toward him, eyes that carried a strange mix of fear and hope. Her lips trembled, but no words came. Daniel stepped closer, keeping his voice gentle. "You'll freeze out here. Do you need something?" Finally, she spoke, her voice broken and weak. I can clean. Please, let me work for food." Her words pierced Daniel's chest because he could hear the hunger behind them. She was not begging for money, not asking for shelter, only for a chance to clean, to earn just a little food. For a moment he hesitated. Letting an alien stranger inside his house at night was risky, but as he watched her shaking form, thin arms and empty eyes, he could not push her away. "Fine," he said at last. "Come in. You can clean." She stepped carefully into the house, her bare feet leaving faint marks on the floor. Daniel noticed how she looked around, almost like she had not been inside a warm home for years. The air around her smelled faintly of rain and dust. She held her arms close, waiting for direction. "The living room," Daniel said, pointing. "Start there." She moved silently, picking up a cloth from the table. At first her hands shook, but then she began to wipe the dust off. The shelves, there was something almost graceful about her movements. Even though she was weak, she cleaned with focus, as if every corner of dirt mattered. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, watching her carefully. The way her glowing patterns flickered softly when she moved made the room feel less empty. She worked. Daniel noticed the way her eyes sometimes lingered on simple objects. An old photo frame, a cracked cup, a book lying open. She touched them with the tip of her fingers, almost like she was remembering something. It was strange, as if she had once lived in a place like this, but long ago. After an hour, the living room looked brighter than before. Dust was gone, the shelves were neat, and the floor was clean. The girl leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, her body weak. Daniel finally placed a plate of bread and soup on the table. Her eyes widened, glowing with hunger and disbelief. She hurried to the table, sat down, and began to eat. Every bite looked like a treasure to her, her hands shaking as she lifted the spoon. Tears rolled down her cheeks, mixing with the food. She whispered softly, "Thank you. Thank you." Daniel said nothing, just sat across the table watching her eat. Inside, his chest felt heavy. He had seen hungry humans before, but this girl's desperation was different. It was like she had not just starved, but also lost every piece of safety in her life. When she finished, she sat still for a moment, holding the empty bowl. Her glowing patterns dimmed slightly and her eyes lowered. Daniel finally asked, "What's your name?" She froze as if the question carried danger. Then very slowly she whispered, "Lyra." The name hung in the air like a secret. Daniel felt there was more pain, more mystery, something hiding behind that name. But she said nothing else, only lowered her gaze. For the first time that night, Daniel realized this was not just a homeless alien. This was someone running from a past, carrying a story too heavy for her small frame. Outside, the wind howled, shaking the windows. Inside, the small house was quiet. Only the sound of her soft breathing remained. Daniel leaned back in his chair, unsure of what he had just allowed into his life. A stranger, yes, but also a mystery, glowing faintly in the dark, and though he did not know it yet, this night would change everything. The next morning, Daniel woke up early, but when he stepped into the living room, he was surprised. The place was shining, not like any usual cleaning he had seen. The old wooden floor looked brighter, the shelves were perfectly neat, and even the windows had a clear glow. It was as if the dust itself had vanished overnight. He looked around, and there she was, Lyra, the alien girl, sitting quietly near the corner with her knees pulled to her chest. Her eyes were half closed, as if she had stayed awake the whole night. Daniel frowned. "You didn't sleep?" She shook her head softly. "I was afraid to close my eyes." Daniel said nothing, but inside questions started building. What was she so afraid of? Why did she work like her life depended on it? And why did she keep looking at ordinary things like they were treasures? When he walked closer, he noticed something even stranger. On the old bookshelf, there had always been one broken clock, covered in dust for years. But now it was not only clean, it was ticking. Daniel's eyes widened. That clock, it hasn't worked for a long time. Lyra lowered her gaze, her fingers playing with the hem of her torn dress. "I only touched it," she whispered. And it started again. A chill passed down his spine. It wasn't normal. This girl was not just some weak cleaner. She carried something else, something hidden. But before he could ask, she quickly stood up and said, "I can clean more." She hurried to the kitchen, picking up a cloth, avoiding his eyes. Daniel followed slowly, watching. As she moved around the kitchen, he noticed her glowing skin patterns flicker when she touched things, the cracked cup on the counter, smooth again, the rusty sink, shining with faint silver light. Every touch of hers seemed to breathe life into dead objects. Daniel whispered to himself, "She's not just cleaning. She's fixing what shouldn't be fixed." He stepped forward, trying to stop her. "Lyra, wait." But she froze suddenly, her hand resting on the kitchen wall. Her glowing patterns brightened and her body trembled. She gasped, almost collapsing. Daniel rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. "Hey, stop, you're hurting yourself," he said firmly. Her eyes, wide with fear, searched his face. I can't stop if I don't work, if I don't prove I'm useful. They will throw me out again." The words struck Daniel like a heavy blow. Thrown out again. By who? By her own people? By someone worse? He helped her sit down, placing a glass of water near her hand. But even while drinking, her gaze went back to the dusty corners of the house, restless. It was clear. This girl was trained or forced to believe that her only worth came from working. As the day passed, Daniel tried to carry on with his normal routine. He stepped outside for errands, bought groceries, and when he returned, he found her again, standing in his study, staring at the desk. His old journal lay open, and she was gently touching the yellowed pages. Her face carried a strange expression, like she could feel the story written there. "Do you read human writing?" Daniel asked, a little sharper than he meant. She jumped back, her glowing patterns dimming instantly. I wasn't stealing. I just wanted to see," she stammered. Daniel sighed, closing the journal. "I didn't say you were stealing," but inside, he could not deny the unease. Why was she drawn to old things? Why did her hands bring broken items back to life? And why did she look at his house with such familiarity? As evening fell, Daniel noticed another thing. Though she worked without stopping, she never asked for anything more than a little food. No demand, no complaint, only that same desperate plea in her eyes. "Don't send me away." After dinner, Daniel sat across from her again. He studied her carefully. "Lyra, why are you really here?" She froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Finally, she whispered, "I can't tell. If I tell, you'll be in danger too." Her words cut deeper than any explanation. Danger. From who? From what? Daniel wanted to push her for answers, but her trembling hand stopped him. He saw the fear there, raw and real, and he knew forcing her would break her. That night, when Daniel went to his room, he left the door slightly open, just in case she needed something, but even from his bed, he could hear her soft footsteps moving across the house, cleaning, fixing, touching every broken thing like she was erasing dust, not just from his house, but from her own haunted past. As he drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought kept echoing. In his mind, who exactly had he let inside his home? A homeless alien or something far more dangerous and broken? The next day started quietly, but Daniel noticed something unusual as soon as he walked into the kitchen. The plate he had left for Lyra was still untouched. The bread was dry now, and the soup had cooled. He frowned, confused. "Didn't you eat?" Lyra was sitting by the window, knees pulled up to her chest, staring outside. Her glowing patterns were dim, almost fading. She turned her head slowly, her eyes hollow and tired. "I don't eat much," she said softly. "I'm used to it." Daniel felt a sharp ache in his chest. No one should ever be used to hunger. He pulled the chair closer and sat across from her. "Listen, I gave you food. You don't have to act like you don't deserve it." Her lips trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "On the streets, food is for the strongest. If I eat too much, someone else suffers, so I learned to take less." Daniel stared at her in silence. It wasn't just physical hunger. It was a wound carved into her mind. She had lived so long in emptiness that even now, with food in front of her, she couldn't believe it was truly hers. Finally, he pushed the plate back toward her. "You're not on the streets anymore, Lyra. In this house, the food is yours. Eat." At first, she hesitated, but when she picked up the bread, her hands shook violently. She bit into it, slowly at first, then faster, like every bite was a fight between habit and need. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she covered her face. Ashamed, "I'm sorry, I can't stop." Daniel reached across the table, his voice gentle. "Don't be sorry. Just eat." For the first time, she ate until her stomach was full, and when she was done, she looked at him with eyes wide in disbelief. Her patterns glowed faintly brighter, as if her body was finally remembering what it meant to be alive. But later, as Daniel washed the dishes, he noticed something. The girl had slipped quietly into the living room. Crouching near the old fireplace, she wasn't cleaning. She was staring at the ashes with a strange expression. When he walked closer, he saw her hands trembling over the black dust, almost as if she wanted to bring the fire back, but was afraid. "To try, Lyra," Daniel said carefully. "You can tell me what's going on." She looked at him quickly, fear flashing in her eyes. "No. If I speak, you'll hate me. You'll throw me away." Daniel shook his head. "You think food and shelter are only earned by silence? That's not how it works here." But her face turned away, stubborn and scared. Whatever secret she carried, it was not ready to come out. That night, Daniel thought she would finally rest, but when he woke up in the middle of the night, he found her again. She was in the kitchen, holding an apple from the basket, not eating it, just staring at it like it was too precious to touch. "Why don't you eat it?" he asked quietly, startling her. She gasped, almost dropping it. I was saving it," she whispered, "for tomorrow or the day after, in case you change your mind." Daniel felt his throat tighten. She still believed kindness was temporary, that any moment the door would open and she would be thrown out again. Slowly, he took the apple from her trembling hands, cut it in half and handed one piece back. "Then let's share it now. That way you don't have to save tomorrow. You can start living today." Her lips parted, her eyes shimmered, and for a long time she just stared at him. Finally, she bit into the apple, and a faint smile broke through her sadness. It was the first time he had seen her smile, small, fragile, but real. The next morning, as Daniel prepared to leave for work, He found Lyra sweeping the floor again, but this time she paused, looked at him, and said something unexpected. "Thank you for letting me eat until I was full." Her voice was shaky, but there was warmth in it too. It was as if, for the first time in years, she had tasted not only food, but safety. Yet as Daniel stepped out the door, he couldn't shake the unease. In his heart, this girl was too broken, too careful, too secretive. Her fear wasn't just of hunger, it was of being hunted, and deep down, he knew the empty stomach was only the beginning. The real hunger she carried was for something much bigger than food, and when that hunger surfaced, it would bring danger right into his home. The night was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel lay in his bed, eyes half closed, trying to let sleep take him. But the silence was broken by something faint. A sound soft at first, like a footstep. He held his breath, listening. There it was again. Creak, creak. The floorboards in the hallway just outside his room. Daniel sat up, heart beating faster. He wasn't the kind of man who got scared easily, but this was his house, his private space, and the thought of someone moving around at night, it didn't sit right. He stood, careful not to make a sound. The old lamp on his bedside table flickered as he touched it. The air in the hallway felt colder than usual. He pushed the door open slowly. In the dim light, he saw her, Lyra, standing, only a few steps away. Her glowing skin pattern shimmered faintly, almost like frightened fireflies. Her hands were clenched, her chest rising and falling quickly, and most of all, her eyes, wide and wet, locked on his door. "Lyra?" Daniel whispered, his voice sharp but controlled. "What are you doing here?" She flinched like a child caught doing something wrong. I heard noises," she whispered back. Her voice was so low he could barely catch the words. "I thought something was in the house and I didn't want you to be hurt." Daniel blinked, his suspicion colliding with confusion. He was sure the noise he heard was her, but the way she spoke, trembling, looking past him into the dark room. She wasn't lying, at least not fully. "What noise?" he asked carefully. She shook her head quickly, pressing her hands over her ears. "Scratching. Whispers. I don't know," she muttered. Her whole body shivered, like a cornered animal. Daniel stepped forward slowly, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Easy. There's nothing here but us." But her eyes darted back toward his room, toward the corner where the shadows were thick, and Daniel couldn't help but glance there too. The darkness looked deeper than before, as if hiding something unseen. "Come on," he said, trying to sound calm. He guided her toward the living room. Once there, he lit a small lamp and placed it on the table. The glow pushed away the shadows. Lyra sank into a chair, clutching her knees. Daniel studied her carefully. "You're not telling me everything," he said. Her head dropped, her long hair covering her face. "I can't," she whispered. "If I tell, they'll find me faster." That word, "they," made his stomach twist. Who was chasing her? Why did she think even words could draw them closer? Before he could ask, another sound echoed. This time Daniel heard it clearly. A thump, faint but real, from the attic above. His breath caught. He hadn't been in the attic for months. No one should be up there. Lyra's eyes widened in terror. She shook her head violently. "No, don't go, please don't open it," she begged. Her hands grabbed his arm with surprising strength. Daniel frowned. "If something's in my house, I need to know." Her glowing patterns flickered brighter, pulsing with fear. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Some doors, once opened, never close again." Daniel's skin crawled at her words, but he couldn't let fear rule him. He pulled his arm free gently. "Stay here," he said firmly. Then he grabbed a flashlight and made his way to the attic ladder. Every step creaked under his weight. The silence pressed on him, heavy and suffocating. When he reached the top, he shone the light around. Dust, boxes, old furniture. Nothing unusual, at least at first glance, but then, in the far corner, he saw it. A set of marks scratched into the wooden beam. Not fresh, but not old either. long claw-like lines crossing over each other, and beneath them, something written in a language he didn't understand, glowing faintly like silver ink. Daniel's mouth went dry. He stumbled back. The marks weren't his, and they weren't human. From below, Lyra's voice trembled. "Did you see it?" she whispered, though she couldn't possibly know what he saw. "Yes," Daniel answered slowly, his throat tight. "What is it, Lyra?" Her silence was heavy. Finally, she spoke. So soft it barely reached him. "It means they've already been here?" Daniel froze, his grip on the flashlight tightening. The attic suddenly felt too small, too dark. He hurried back down, slamming the ladder shut. His heart pounded in his chest as he faced her again. She was trembling, rocking back and forth, her eyes full of tears, her voice cracking. "You shouldn't have looked. Now you'll see them too." The words struck him cold. For the first time since she entered his house, Daniel wasn't sure if he had given shelter to a victim, or if he had opened his door to a storm that was about to destroy them both. The night dragged on after the attic incident. Daniel locked the ladder tight, but his mind could not rest. Those strange marks, that glowing script, it haunted him, and Lyra's trembling words kept echoing in his head. "Now you'll see them too." He tried to sleep, but every creak of the house made him tense. He turned from side to side, pulling the blanket closer. Finally, when exhaustion won, his eyes closed, only to open again in shock. Someone was in the room. The faint silver glow gave her away. Lyra, standing near his bed, her hands clutched the blanket, her chest rising and falling fast. Daniel sat up quickly, his voice low but sharp. "What are you doing here, Lyra?" Her lips parted, trembling. I didn't want to be alone," she whispered. Her eyes darted to the window as if she expected something outside. Daniel followed her gaze, but the glass only reflected the dark night. Still, he felt it too. The uneasy weight of being watched. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You can't keep sneaking into my room," he said, trying to sound stern. But when he looked at her closely, his tone softened. Her face was pale, her glowing patterns dim. She wasn't here out of mischief. She was here out of raw fear. "Please," she whispered again, "don't send me away tonight." "Just tonight." Her voice cracked and she hugged herself tightly. Daniel's chest tightened. He could have ordered her out, but something in her eyes stopped him. They weren't the eyes of a liar. They were the eyes of someone haunted. "Sit," he finally said, motioning to the chair near the bed. But instead, Lyra shook her head. Slowly, nervously, she sat on the edge of the bed itself, as if she needed closeness just to breathe. Daniel exhaled, uneasy but silent. "Tell me the truth, Lyra. Why are you so afraid?" he asked. Her hands gripped the blanket, her voice shaking. "They don't like when I rest. When I stop moving, they whisper louder. I thought, maybe near you, the voices will fade." Daniel froze. Whispers? Voices? He thought back to the attic scratches, the faint sound he heard before. Could she be right? Was there something more in his house than just dust and memories? She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Back in my world, they called me marked," she confessed. "They said I carried something dangerous, that my touch woke things that should sleep forever." Her words sent chills down Daniel's spine. He remembered the clock ticking again, the sink shining, the claw marks above. "Pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to solve, Lyra," he said carefully. "If that's true, why come here? Why me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't choose," she whispered. "I was chased. I ran until I had nothing. No place, no food, no hope. And then I saw you." Daniel stared at her. It was hard to tell if her being here was fate or accident. But one thing was clear. His quiet life was over. As the silence stretched, another sound pierced it. A tap, faint but sharp, at the window. Both of them whipped their heads toward the glass. The curtains swayed slightly, though the night outside was still. Daniel's heart pounded. He jumped from the bed, pulling the curtain aside with one swift motion. Nothing. Just the dark street, empty and cold. But when he turned back, Lyra was curled on the bed, hands pressed to her ears. "They're here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They never stop following." Daniel felt anger rise inside him, not at her but at whoever or whatever had made her live in constant terror. He sat back down beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Listen to me, Lyra," he said firmly. "This is my house. Whatever hunts you, whatever whispers to you, it won't touch you here." She lifted her eyes wide and desperate, searching his face for truth. "You don't understand," she said weakly. "You can't fight them. No one can." Daniel leaned closer, his voice steady. Maybe no one tried hard enough, her lips parted like she wanted to argue. But instead a single tear rolled down her cheek. Slowly she laid down, curling on one side of the bed. Her breathing was shallow at first, then slowly softened. For the first time, sleep took her, though her glowing patterns flickered faintly like a dying fire. Daniel lay back, staring at the ceiling. He knew letting her stay in his bed was crossing a line of safety, but he also knew if he had pushed her out, she would have shattered. Some part of him had already made a choice, and though he didn't realize it yet, that choice would bind his fate to hers. The house remained quiet, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the silence wasn't natural. It was waiting, watching, like the darkness itself was holding its breath. And in that silence, with Lyra asleep beside him, Daniel realized the truth. The danger wasn't outside anymore. It was already inside his walls, inside his bed, and soon it would demand a price. The morning sun spilled weak light through the curtains. Daniel woke with a stiff back, but his eyes opened to something more unsettling than pain. Lyra was still, lying beside him, her glowing skin patterns faint like dim embers. She looked smaller, weaker, as if the night had drained her instead of giving her rest. Daniel sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. For a brief moment he wondered if everything had been a dream. The attic scratches, the whispers, the tapping at the window. But when he looked at her fragile form curled on the bed, reality returned, heavy and sharp. He stood and moved to the kitchen. The sound of dishes clinking finally woke her. She sat up quickly, her eyes darting around the room like a hunted animal. When she saw Daniel, relief washed across her face, but it lasted only a moment. Then her shoulders slumped, as if the weight of her secret pressed her down again. "Sit," Daniel said firmly, setting bread and water on the table. She obeyed, her hands trembling as she picked at the crust. He sat across from her, leaning forward, his tone steady but unyielding. "Lyra, enough half-truths. Last night wasn't just fear. Something is following you. You owe me the truth now." Her eyes filled with panic. "No," she whispered. "If I tell you, you'll send me away. Or worse, you'll try to help and then they'll take you too." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to slam his hand on the table, demand answers. But one look at her shaking frame stopped him. She wasn't hiding out of pride. She was hiding out of terror. He softened his voice. "Listen, I already let you in. I already saw the marks in the attic. I already heard the noises. I'm already involved, whether you like it or not. So tell me, Lyra, what are they?" Her breath caught, and tears spilled down her cheeks. She whispered, as if, even speaking, the words might summon shadows. "They are the collectors." Daniel frowned. "Collectors?" She nodded, her eyes fixed on the table. "They hunt the marked, those who carry the spark inside. They don't care if we are guilty or innocent. They only care that we are different. Once they find us, they take us away. We never return." The word never echoed in Daniel's mind like a grave bell. "And you're marked?" he asked. Her hands trembled, her glowing patterns flickered like weak fire. "Yes. My touch, it wakes things. Machines, objects, even memories. It's not normal, it's dangerous. My people feared me, they cast me out. But the collectors," her voice broke, "they want me for what I carry inside." Daniel leaned back, his breath sharp, It explained everything, the clock ticking, the sink shining, the attic scratches that weren't his. Pieces of her secret were finally aligning, but another question burned inside him. Why here? Why my house? Her eyes finally lifted, meeting his. For a long time, I ran. From street to street, from planet to planet. But I was starving, breaking, losing hope. Then, I saw your window light that night. It was warm. I thought, maybe just one night I could eat before they catch me. Just one night of safety. Daniel's chest tightened. She hadn't chosen him because of fate or plan. She had chosen him because he was the only light left in her darkness. Silence filled the room, broken only by the soft ticking of the once dead clock on the shelf. Finally, Daniel asked the question that had been clawing at him since the attic. And those marks above? The words I couldn't read? Her face turned pale. They were left by the collectors, a warning. It means they already searched here once. If they realize I'm hiding with you, they'll come back. Daniel's stomach twisted. So the danger wasn't only near, it was guaranteed. The moment she crossed his threshold, his house became a target. Then why stay? He demanded, his frustration breaking through. Why drag me into this? Her voice cracked, almost a sob. Because I had nowhere else to go. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted to bring death to your door? I only wanted food, only wanted to clean just to feel useful again. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He should have been angry, should have thrown her out right then. But instead, he felt something else rise in his chest. Pity, anger, protection. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Lyra, look at me. Slowly, she lifted her tear-stained face. You are not trash to be thrown away. You're not a curse. You're a living being who's been hunted and starved. And if the collectors come here, his eyes hardened. They'll find I'm not as easy to break as you think. She stared at him, her mouth slightly open. Her glowing patterns flickered brighter like faint hope struggling to ignite. No one has ever said that to me, she whispered. Daniel gave a faint smile, though his stomach churned with fear. Well, maybe it's time someone did. But even as he spoke, the old house groaned around them. A sound low and deep, almost like the earth itself breathing. Lyra's eyes widened in terror, her voice barely audible. They've found me. They're coming. The house shuddered again, a low groan rolling through the walls. Daniel froze, his breath sharp. Lyra's glowing patterns flickered wildly, like a flame in the wind. She pressed her back to the wall, whispering, They're here. The collectors. Outside, the night was silent, yet heavy. As if the darkness itself had weight pressing down on the house, Daniel moved to the window, peering into the street. At first, nothing. Then, shadows, tall and shifting, moving like smoke, but with form. Figures that weren't fully solid, yet not air either. Their eyes glowed faint silver, scanning, searching. Daniel's stomach twisted. They were real, not hallucinations, not tricks. The things that had chased Lyra across worlds had finally arrived at his door. Behind him, Lyra trembled, her voice breaking. You should give me to them, Daniel. If you don't, they'll take everything. Your house, your life, everything will burn because of me. He turned sharply, his voice like steel. Stop, don't ever say that again. Her eyes widened, tears spilling. But it's true. That's what always happens. Anyone who helps the marked is destroyed. Please, don't ruin yourself for me. Daniel stepped closer, crouching so his eyes were level with hers. Listen to me. I've spent years in this house, living quietly, watching the world pass. No family, no one to care about, no one to fight for. And then you showed up, hungry, scared, but still trying to survive. You cleaned, you fixed, you cried, you begged. And for the first time in years, I felt like my life meant something. His voice softened, but his eyes never wavered. If they want you, they'll have to come through me. That's my choice, not yours. Lyra covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing silently. Her patterns glowed brighter now, not from fear, but from hope she couldn't believe was real. The walls shook again, harder this time, dust falling from the ceiling. The shadows outside pressed closer, their glowing eyes fixing on the house. One of them raised a long hand, pressing it against the window glass. Frost spread instantly across the pane, cracking the edges. Daniel grabbed the heavy iron rod he kept near the fireplace. It was nothing compared to whatever they were, but it was something in his hands, and sometimes a human didn't need more than that. He stood tall, his back to Lyra, his voice firm. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." The first crack split the window. A whisper slid into the room, cold and sharp. "Give her to us." Daniel's grip tightened. His heart pounded. But his voice was steady. "No." The whisper grew louder, echoing through the walls. "She belongs to us. The marked are ours. You cannot keep her." Daniel's jaw clenched. He lifted the iron rod, pointing it at the shadows beyond the glass. "You don't get to decide that. Not here. Not in my house." The shadows pressed harder, the window rattling violently. Lyra gasped, clutching his arm. "They'll kill you." Daniel looked at her, his eyes fierce. "Maybe, but listen carefully, Lyra. You cleaned my house, yes, but maybe tonight I can clean your life from fear. That's the deal." Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then, in a trembling whisper, she said, "No one has ever said words like that to me." The glass shattered. Icy shards sprang across the floor. The first collector pushed through, its body half shadow, half metal, its glowing eyes locked on Lyra. Daniel stepped forward, swinging the rod with all his strength. The metal connected with the creature's form, sparking as if striking steel. The collector staggered back, hissing like steam. Behind Daniel, Lyra cried out. Her glowing patterns flared brilliantly, brighter than ever before. The broken objects in the room trembled. The old clock ticked faster. The cracked cup hummed. The iron rod in Daniel's hands glowed faint silver. Daniel felt the weight shift, the rod suddenly stronger. Heavier, he realized. It was her power flowing into him. For the first time, she wasn't just a burden. She was fighting with him. Together, they faced the shadows pressing at the windows and doors Daniel swung. She glowed, and the house itself seemed to resist the intruders. At last, the whispers grew weaker. The collectors retreated, their forms dissolving into the night. The frost melted from the windows and silence returned. Daniel collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. The glowing rod clattered to the floor, now only dull iron again. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his shoulder. You stood against them," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Daniel managed a tired smile. "Yeah, I told you. They don't get to decide your life." She stared at him, her tears shining like silver light. For the first time since she had entered his house, her voice carried no fear, only fragile hope. "Then, can I stay? Just a little longer?" Daniel looked at her, this broken but resilient alien girl who had stumbled into his life, and he knew his answer. "As long as you need. You're safe here. With me." The words hung in the quiet air, and, though the danger was not gone forever, that night in the warmth of a small house, a human choice had changed everything.